My parents thought it was normal for my sister to sleep with my boyfriend in the house I bought. The first time I paid my parents' electric bill, I was 19 and still smelled like fryer grease from my shift. I remember standing in the tiny kitchen we rented, staring at the shut-off notice like it was a personal insult, while my mother kept saying, "Don't panic. We'll figure it out," in the same calm voice she used when she broke a plate and pretended it didn't matter. It mattered. The lights mattered. The heat mattered. My little sister mattered too, apparently, just in a different way. Also, I should probably tell you my name because otherwise this is going to sound like a ghost story told by a utility bill. I'm Brielle. Growing up, money was always the third parent in our house. It wasn't just tight. It was this constant presence, like background noise you can't turn off. I learned how to read envelopes before I learned how to relax. I learned what final notice meant the way other kids learned what a report card meant. And I learned early that the quickest way to stop my mother from spiraling was to become useful. When I was in high school, I'd come home and find my mother sitting at the kitchen table with her phone in one hand and her forehead in the other, saying, "I don't know what we're going to do," while my sister watched videos on the couch like the house wasn't on fire. My father would be in the garage, fixing something, which was his way of avoiding the emotional part of being an adult. I became the interpreter, the translator, the "okay, what's the actual number" person. I'd ask for the login. I'd call the company. I'd ask for a payment plan. My mother would cry with relief and then tell everyone I was so mature. Like maturity was something you're born with instead of something you get forced into. My sister got the opposite lesson. She learned that if she cried loud enough, the world rearranged itself for her. And she was good at it. If I said, "That's not fair," my mother would hit me with the classic, "Life isn't fair." If my sister said, "That's not fair," my mother would say, "You're right, baby," and find a way to fix it. There's a moment burned into my brain from when we were teenagers. My sister wanted to go on a weekend trip with friends. My parents didn't have the money. My mother said no. My sister slammed her bedroom door, then came out crying and said she felt unloved. My mother immediately looked at me like I'd done something wrong. "Can you help?" she asked. I was 17. I had a part-time job. I bought my sister's trip ticket with money I'd been saving for a used laptop for school. My sister hugged me and said, "You're the best," and then posted pictures of the trip like she'd earned it. My mother told everyone how close we were. My father patted my shoulder like I'd done a noble thing, and I carried that pattern into adulthood like a backpack full of bricks. I didn't know how to be loved without paying for it. So when I say I bought my parents a house at 31, it's not because I was an angel. It's because every crisis felt like a fire alarm going off inside me. Panic that said if I didn't fix it, something terrible would happen and it would be my fault. My mother liked to label us like it was helpful. I was the strong one. My sister was the sensitive one. That was her whole system. If my sister cried, the world stopped. If I cried, I was told to be practical. If my sister made a mistake, she needed support. If I made a mistake, I should have known better. It was so normal in our house that I didn't even have a name for it back then. I just knew that if something had to be handled, it would somehow land in my lap. So at 19, with my checks barely covering my own gas and groceries, I paid the bill. I did it with my card because my parents' account kept overdrafting, and because my father's job hours were always about to pick up, and because my mother's side hustle was always about to take off. If I had $1 for every time I heard "about to," I wouldn't have needed the side job I was working in the first place. I didn't even tell my sister. I just paid it and went to bed with that stressed out kind of tired that feels like you're made of sand. The next morning, my sister was in the living room whining about how she couldn't find her favorite sweater for school. My mother was soothing her like she was recovering from a natural disaster. Nobody asked how I'd slept. Nobody asked how I'd managed to pay anything. It was just assumed. Years went by like that, stacked on top of each other like unpaid envelopes. I worked through community college, landed an office job, clawed my way into something stable. I was not rich. I was not living the dream. But I could cover my rent, keep my car running, and buy myself decent groceries without doing mental math in the checkout line. I thought that was what peace felt like. My sister, of course, had her own definition of peace, which was somebody else doing the heavy lifting while she floated around looking for the next thing to want. She also had this weird habit of copying me, not in the cute, little sister looks up to you way, more like in the I will wear your skin if you hold still long enough way. When I got my first steady job with benefits, she suddenly decided she always wanted to do the same kind of course I'd done. When I found a small friend group I actually liked, she started showing up at the same hangouts. When I cut my hair into a blunt shoulder-length style, she did it 2 weeks later and posted about her new era. If I bought a simple coat in the winter, she bought the same one in a different color and acted like she'd invented coats. I used to laugh about it to coworkers like it was harmless. She's just trying to find herself, I'd say. Meanwhile, I was quietly locking my bedroom door at my parents' place anytime I visited, because she had borrowed things that never came back. By the time I was 31, I had gotten comfortable in my boring little life. I had a decent job in an office that handled scheduling and billing for a clinic. I had a small apartment with mismatched furniture because I refused to go into debt to look like a catalog. I had a routine. I had boundaries. I was honestly kind of proud of myself. Then my father called me on a Tuesday evening with that shaky voice he used when he was trying to sound like everything was fine. "We might be in a little trouble with rent," he said. I didn't even need the details. I could already feel my stomach sinking, because that sentence was basically our family anthem. A little trouble meant big trouble. A little trouble meant someone was about to ask me to solve it. "What happened?" I asked, already opening the Notes app on my phone like a reflex. He mumbled something about hours being cut, something about the landlord being no nonsense, something about it being just for a month. My mother got on the phone in the background, talking over him, saying how they'd never ask if it wasn't serious. And my sister was quiet. She always went quiet when money was involved. She'd suddenly developed this selective muteness where she could still laugh at videos and argue about meaningless stuff, but if you mentioned rent, she'd become a statue. I stared at my living room, at my cheap couch and my stack of bills and the little jar I kept labeled emergency that was just, "Please don't let my car die." I could have said no. I could have told them to figure it out. I could have let them face consequences like adults. But the thought of them being evicted made me panic in a way that didn't even feel like a choice. I grew up with that fear baked into my bones, so I did what I always did. I tried to control the disaster. I didn't have money to throw at a never-ending rent hole, but I did have savings. Not a lot, but enough to put a down payment on something small. And I had good credit, because I was the only one in my family who treated payment deadlines like they were real. So I started looking at modest houses in areas that were cheaper than where I lived. Nothing fancy. A small place with a yard that needed love and an old kitchen that made me want to cry, but it was solid. It was something that could give my parents stability without them constantly begging landlords to give them one more chance. I told myself it was an investment. Lie. I told myself I could rent it out later. Also a lie. The truth was uglier. I wanted to stop living in fear of my parents' next phone call. When I found a house that felt doable, I moved fast. Too fast, honestly. I emptied most of my savings, signed my name, paid the closing costs, and walked out of the office feeling like I'd just jumped off a cliff and hoped the ground would be soft. I kept the property in my name because I was paying for it, and because I didn't trust my family to handle paperwork without setting it on fire. I didn't say it like that, obviously. I said it like, "It's just easier this way." My father nodded gratefully. My mother hugged me and cried in that dramatic way she did when she wanted to make sure I felt important. My sister acted like the whole thing was a group project. "You're literally saving us," my mother said, hands pressed to her chest like she was in a movie. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt tired. I felt like I'd just placed a giant boulder on my own shoulders and told everyone it was fine. Still, when they moved into the house, they looked relieved. My father smiled more. My mother started talking about fresh starts. For a minute, it almost felt worth it. The deal was simple. My parents lived there. Guests were fine. Nobody turned it into a fresh start on my dime. Since there was no formal lease, just a family arrangement, I kept the deed in my name, and they understood it wasn't theirs to control. Then, a few weeks later, my sister got kicked out by her boyfriend. She was in her mid-20s, employed, and could have rented a room. She just didn't want to. That's how my mother framed it. Like my sister was a victim of sudden cruelty. Like she hadn't been living with that guy rent-free while spending her paycheck on random shopping. "She has nowhere to go," my mother said, voice already cracking. I didn't even know the question was coming, and yet I felt my whole body brace. "We have the extra room," my father said quickly, like he was trying to sound optimistic instead of terrified. They told me this like it was a little update, like it was nothing, like I didn't own the place, like my sister moving into a house I'd bought with my last ounce of stability was a minor detail. I swallowed my irritation because I didn't want to fight. I told myself the same thing I always told myself. It's temporary. It's family. It's not worth the drama. So my sister moved in, and the house that was supposed to be my parents' safe place turned into my sister's new stage. My sister's temporary stay turned into a lifestyle in record time. She brought friends over without asking. She started using my parents' address for deliveries like she was planting a flag. She'd leave dishes in the sink and then text me later. "Can you tell Mom to chill? She's being dramatic," as if I was her customer service line. One weekend, I walked in and saw that she'd moved the little desk my father used for paperwork into the garage so she could put a vanity in the spare room. A full vanity, with lights, like she was filming tutorials. My father stood there holding a screwdriver, looking defeated. "She said she needs it for confidence," my mother whispered to me, like this was medical equipment. I stared at the vanity and felt my eye twitch. "And where is Dad supposed to do bills?" My mother shrugged. "He'll figure it out." Of course he would. Because when it was inconvenient for my sister, everyone else figured it out. I tried to set small boundaries first. I asked my parents to tell her to stop repainting things without permission. I asked them to tell her to stop inviting people over late at night. I asked them, gently, to remind her that it wasn't her house. My mother would nod and say, "I'll talk to her." Then nothing would happen. Or my sister would text me later with a passive-aggressive message like, "Sorry my existence bothers you." And because I'm apparently allergic to peace, I'd end up apologizing just to stop the tension. I know. I hate me too. The worst part was how quickly she started rewriting the story. She'd tell people, "My family got a house," like it was this joint achievement. She'd talk about moving back home to help Mom and Dad, like she was some caretaker instead of a grown woman who didn't want to pay rent. She even started calling me lucky for having a stable job, like I'd won a prize instead of grinding for it. One night, my father called me quietly, like he was admitting a crime. "She wants to bring her boyfriend over," he said. "For the weekend." I almost laughed. "Does she want to start charging admission too?" My father sighed. "Your mom says it'll keep her happy." Keep her happy? Always the mission. I told my father, "Do what you want, but don't pretend this is what I bought the house for." He went silent. Then he said, "I know," in this small, defeated voice that made me feel both furious and guilty. And that's the thing. My father's sadness was always used like a leash. If I pulled away, I was hurting him. If I stayed involved, I was hurting myself. So I stayed involved. I kept driving over. I kept buying groceries. I kept fixing things. I told myself I was helping my parents. But if I'm being honest, I was also trying to prove I deserved a place in my own family. At first, it was the small stuff. She painted her room without asking and left little drips on the baseboards. She rearranged the living room because the vibe was off. She started calling the house our place in conversations, like she'd put even $1 into it. My mother laughed along. My father looked nervous and kept saying, "Let's all just get along." That's my father's superpower. He can turn any conflict into a fog. He'll stand in the middle of it, blinking, acting confused, hoping the problem will dissolve if nobody names it. Meanwhile, I was driving over on weekends, bringing groceries, paying for little repairs, swapping out a broken faucet because I couldn't stand the thought of water damage. I never kept much there. Just a folder with paperwork, a spare set of tools, the kind of things you need when you're the person who handles problems. Every time I did something, my mother would say, "You're such a good daughter." And my sister would say, "Thanks," like I'd done it for her. I started feeling like a walking wallet with a heartbeat. Then, 2 months into this whole arrangement, something good happened to me for the first time. Not money good, just life good. I joined a recreational sports league after a coworker basically bullied me into it. "You need hobbies," she said, "not just survival." She was right, which made me mad. I kept going because it was the only place my life still felt mine. Just movement, competition, nothing that required fixing anyone. That's where I met him. A guy who seemed easy to be around. Funny, kind of charming, a little too hungry for attention if I'm honest. But I told myself I was being overly critical because I was rusty at dating. We started talking after games. Then we started grabbing food with a group. Then he asked for my number. Dating him felt like stepping into sunlight after living in a basement. He would text me little updates about his day, like, "Guess what happened?" And I'd realize nobody in my family ever did that with me. My family only contacted me when something was wrong or needed paying. This guy contacted me because he wanted to share a stupid story about a coworker bringing the wrong lunch. We went out for coffee a few times after games. Then we started seeing each other on weekdays, grabbing dinner in low-key places where nobody knew us. We talked about our childhoods. He told me his parents were kind of intense. And I thought, same. He listened when I talked. He laughed at my jokes. He liked that I was responsible, which should have been a red flag because men who like responsible sometimes mean easy to rely on. I ignored that thought because I wanted to be happy, and because I was tired of feeling like I had to earn every nice thing. He met my friends first, and it went well. My friends liked him. One of them even said, "He seems sweet," and I felt this stupid warmth in my chest like I'd finally chosen something right. The first small crack came when I noticed he needed constant reassurance. If I took a while to text back, he'd send like an anxious teenager. If I said I was tired, he'd ask, "Are you mad at me?" If I didn't laugh at a joke, he'd fish for compliments. It wasn't scary, just needy. And after a lifetime of being emotionally parentified, the last thing I needed was another person who needed me to manage their feelings. Still, he wasn't cruel. He wasn't mean. He was just hungry. And my sister could smell hunger, like a shark smells blood. After a couple of months, it got serious enough that I decided to introduce him to my family. Not because I needed their approval, but because I was tired of acting like my family was this separate, embarrassing planet. I wanted to believe I could have both, love and whatever version of family I was still clinging to. So I invited everyone to dinner at my parents' house. I brought food. I cleaned up the kitchen because my mother's idea of hosting was lighting a candle and letting chaos be rustic. My boyfriend showed up with a nervous smile and that please-like-me energy I thought was sweet. My sister was dressed like she was going to a party. Not a dinner with family, a party. Hair done, makeup done, outfit that screamed, "I want to be looked at." I noticed. I pretended I didn't. This is the theme of my life. Noticing things and then gaslighting myself into silence. During dinner, she kept leaning toward him, laughing too hard at everything he said. She complimented him like she'd been waiting all day for the chance. "You're actually really handsome," she said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I kicked her under the table. She smirked. My boyfriend blushed like a teenager. He ate it up. He loved it. And I felt this cold little twist in my stomach because I recognized that hunger. My sister had always been able to smell who wanted to be worshipped, and she loved being the altar. She kept touching his arm when she talked. Not like an accident, like punctuation. She made these little comments about how interesting he was compared to the boring guys I usually went for. I wanted to throw a dinner roll at her head, but I didn't. I smiled. I smiled so hard I think I pulled a muscle. When we left, my boyfriend said, "Your sister is hilarious." I said, "Yeah, she's a lot." He laughed like I was being cute. A few days later, he mentioned that my sister had followed him on a social media app and sent him a message. He said it like it was a funny little thing. "She just said she's glad you're happy," he told me. I tried to be chill. I tried. I said, "Okay." I told myself it was harmless. I told myself not to be the jealous girlfriend. Because in my family, anytime I had a reaction to anything, it was labeled a personality flaw. But then the messages kept coming. He'd mention her name too casually, like she was now part of his daily world. And every time I asked what they talked about, he'd say, "Nothing, just random stuff," and then immediately change the subject. And then he started guarding his phone, not hiding it exactly, but doing that thing where he'd angle the screen away from me, like he was just being private. At first, I told myself it was normal. People are allowed privacy. I'm not entitled to every conversation, but my gut didn't care about my logic. My gut was screaming. Our dates got shorter. He was tired all the time. He was suddenly busy on weekends. Intimacy faded, not just physical, but emotional. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped making plans. He started acting like spending time with me was something he had to fit in, like a chore he was trying to do quickly. One night, my phone buzzed with a notification from my mother. She'd posted a photo from the house. My sister and my boyfriend standing near the grill, laughing, like they were in a couple's commercial. My father was in the background looking like he wanted to disappear. The caption was something about family time. I stared at the photo until my eyes hurt. The next day was a holiday celebration, one of those forced family gatherings where people pretend they like each other because there's food. I showed up with a tight smile and a bag of groceries, because apparently I am incapable of arriving anywhere without providing supplies. My boyfriend was already there. My mother had texted the family group to come early, and I saw it too late. I'd confirmed the time, but they changed it without telling me, so he was already there. My sister was already there. They barely looked at me when I walked in. Not in some movie way, in a casual way that felt worse, like I was furniture. I watched them trade glances, little private smiles, inside jokes that didn't include me. I felt my hands go numb. I cornered my boyfriend in the kitchen when my mother went to get more paper plates. "Are you and my sister okay?" I asked. He blinked at me. What do you mean? Like, are you talking a lot? He laughed like I'd told a joke. Babe, relax. That word, relax, has never once made me relax. It has only ever made me want to explode. On the drive home, I asked again, more directly, is something going on? He got defensive immediately. You're being paranoid. I said, I'm not paranoid, I'm noticing patterns. He said, you always do this. You always assume the worst. I felt my face heat. Always? I've never accused you of anything before. He shrugged. My vibe. Like I was a bad playlist. I wanted to scream. Instead, I did the thing I'm trained to do. I questioned myself. I told myself I was projecting my family trauma onto him. I told myself he'd never do that. I told myself my sister wouldn't go that far. Because here's the thing. Even when your family has shown you who they are for years, part of you still wants to believe they won't cross certain lines. You keep drawing imaginary lines in your head, like they care. The next weekend, my boyfriend canceled plans last minute. My friend needs help moving, he texted. It's an emergency. I said, okay, because I was trying not to be crazy. But I didn't believe him. Not for 1 second. So I did something impulsive and not proud. I drove to my parents' house. I told myself I was just going to drop off something. Another lie. I told myself I wasn't going to make a scene. I just needed to see if his car was there. I just needed my gut to stop screaming. When I pulled up, my parents' car was gone. My sister's car was in the driveway, and my boyfriend's car was parked right behind it like it belonged there. My hands started shaking on the steering wheel. My mouth went dry. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the cars, trying to talk myself out of it. Then I remembered. I had a key. Not because I was sneaky, because I was the one who handled things. I was the one who paid for repairs and dropped off supplies. My mother had given me a key years ago and never taken it back because she liked having me on call. So I walked up to the door like I was sleepwalking. I let myself in. The house smelled like someone had lit a cheap candle to cover up the fact that nobody cleaned. I heard laughter coming from down the hall. My stomach turned. I stood outside my sister's bedroom door with my hand on the knob, and my brain did this weird thing where it tried to protect me. It started offering me alternate realities. Maybe he's just there to help her with something. Maybe they're watching a movie. Maybe she's crying about her breakup and he's being supportive. Maybe I'm about to humiliate myself for no reason. Then I heard my boyfriend's voice, low and warm, and my sister's giggle, and something inside me snapped. I opened the door. I understood everything before my brain would let me say it out loud. They were on her bed. Too close. Too comfortable. The way they froze. The way they looked at each other first. Like they were checking what story to tell. That was the part that really wrecked me. Later, when I finally looked at the messages they'd been hiding, it was painfully clear they'd been sleeping together for weeks. My eyes grabbed stupid details. His shoes near the dresser, my sister's hair messed up in that effortless way she saved for attention, and my stomach flipped. I made a sound I didn't recognize. It was half scream, half choke. My body went hot and cold at the same time. I felt dizzy. My sister's eyes went wide. My boyfriend jerked upright like he'd been shocked. Then, because he is who he is, he immediately put on his nice guy face like he could talk his way out of gravity. Wait, he said. It's not... I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain couldn't find another response. I started yelling. I don't even remember the words. Just noise. Rage, grief, humiliation. I grabbed whatever I saw that looked like it belonged to him. His hoodie, his shoes, a stupid little framed photo of us from a team event, and I threw it on the floor. Not at them. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone physically. I just needed something to break. I didn't touch either of them. I just knocked his things to the floor and walked out. My sister started crying. Of course she did. The sensitive one. The victim. Stop! She wailed. You're scaring me! I turned on her like a flame. I'm scaring you? My boyfriend tried to step between us. Please, calm down. You're being irrational. I ran out of the room. I made it to the bathroom and threw up, hard. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn on the faucet. I looked in the mirror, and my face didn't look like mine. It looked like someone who'd been hit. I stumbled outside, gasping for air like I'd been underwater. I sat in my car and started sobbing so violently my whole chest hurt. A few minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway. My parents came home. I didn't even have time to decide what I wanted. The front door opened, and my mother's voice shot through the house like a siren. What is going on? She yelled. I got out of the car and walked inside like I was walking into my own funeral. My father looked at me, then down the hall, then back at me, his face already pinched with fear. Fear of conflict, fear of consequences, fear of losing the house. My mother rushed toward my sister's door. "Are you okay?" she called, before she even knew what happened. I stood in the living room shaking. My boyfriend came out, trying to fix his hair like he was about to attend a meeting. My sister came out behind him, wrapped in a blanket like she was a tragedy. My mother's eyes darted between us. "What happened?" I said it. I said the words out loud. They were in bed together. There was a pause, and I kept waiting for shock. But they moved like it was normal. My father swallowed. My mother blinked. And then, this is the part that still makes me feel insane when I think about it, my mother's face softened toward my sister. "Oh, honey," she said, like my sister had scraped her knee. I stared at her. "Are you kidding me?" My father lifted his hands. "This is messy, but it happens. Let's all just breathe." My mother turned to me, voice sharp with warning. "Don't start screaming. These things happen. Adults do this sometimes. We can talk calmly." I said, "You're acting like this is normal. They did this in the house I bought." My mother's mouth tightened. "Don't start with the house thing. It's our home now." And then she said the sentence that stabbed me in the chest and twisted. "She's finally happy. It's not the end of the world. And you already have everything. Let her have one thing. One thing. Like my boyfriend was a sweater. Like my sister was entitled to my life because she felt like it." I felt my whole body go numb. I looked at my father, desperate for him to say something. Anything. He just stood there, eyes darting, trying to calculate what would keep the peace. He nodded like this was just inconvenient. "Let's not make it bigger than it is," he said. In that moment, I realized something so ugly it almost made me laugh. My family wasn't shocked because my sister betrayed me. They were shocked because I caught her. Because now they had to deal with consequences, and consequences are the one thing my sister has never been forced to face. I left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't slam the door. I just walked out because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. In my car, I cried so hard I had to pull over in a parking lot because my vision kept blurring. I called a friend and said, "I think my family hates me." And she said, "No, they just love what you do for them." And I sat there shaking because that sounded too true. The days after I caught them were this weird blur where time felt thick. I slept badly, jumped every time my phone buzzed, and replayed the scene on a loop like my brain was punishing me. My mother, my sister, and my ex flooded me with calls and voice messages, sometimes apologizing, sometimes blaming me for overreacting, like betrayal was just bad timing. One night I actually did answer a call, from my father. I don't know why. Maybe because I still wanted him to be different. Maybe because I felt guilty. Maybe because I was exhausted and my defenses were down. He sounded small. "Your mother is upset," he said, like I didn't know. "I'm upset," I snapped. He sighed. I know, but you have to understand, your sister is fragile. Fragile." I almost laughed. Fragile people don't sneak around and sleep with someone's partner. Fragile people don't smirk at the dinner table while touching a man's arm. I said, "Dad, she's not fragile. She's entitled." He went quiet, then whispered, "If you do anything that makes us lose the house, I don't know what we'll do." And there it was. The real conversation. Not my heartbreak, not my humiliation. The house. I hung up and slid down the wall onto the floor crying because part of me finally accepted what I'd been avoiding. My parents' love had conditions, and the biggest condition was my usefulness. At work, I got through days by pretending I was fine. I'd smile at patients. I'd answer calls. I'd schedule appointments. I'd type up boring spreadsheets. And then I'd go to the bathroom and cry silently in a stall like a teenager, because I couldn't let anyone see how messy my life really was. My friend kept telling me, "You need to eat." And I'd say, "I know." And then I'd take 2 bites and feel nauseous. My body was on alert all the time. I'd jump when my phone buzzed. I'd flinch when someone raised their voice on a TV show. I was living like I was under threat, even though the threat was just my own family. I also did this petty thing I'm not proud of. I went back through old memories and started noticing all the times my sister had done smaller versions of this. The times she'd flirted with a guy I liked in high school as a joke. The times she'd steal my clothes and then act offended if I asked for them back. The times she'd accidentally show up where I was and then take over the room. It wasn't new. This was just the first time she'd gone all the way and my parents had still handed her a trophy. My boyfriend called. I didn't answer. He texted, Please let me explain. My sister texted. I'm sorry. It just happened. My mother texted. We need to talk like adults. The next day, my boyfriend showed up at my apartment. I didn't let him in. I stood in the doorway like a bouncer for my own dignity. He started with excuses. He started with, it was a mistake. He started with, we didn't mean to hurt you. He started with, your sister needed someone. Like my sister was a wounded bird and he was a saint with terrible boundaries. I cut him off. Get your stuff out of my life. He tried to look hurt. You're throwing us away over something that happened once? I said, I saw the messages. Don't lie to my face. He shrugged like I was overreacting. You're making it bigger than it is. So I closed the door. A week passed. I barely ate. I went to work like a robot. My coworkers asked if I was okay, and I said, I'm fine, because that's what you say in offices even when your life is on fire. Then my mother called. She didn't start with an apology. Of course she didn't. She started with guilt. You're being so harsh, she said. People make mistakes. I gripped the phone so hard my fingers hurt. My sister slept with my boyfriend. And you two weren't even together that long, she said quickly. Like that erased the betrayal. You're acting like you were married. So now my pain had a time limit. Great. She went on, voice rising. Your sister is truly in love. And you, honestly, you've always been a little controlling. Maybe this is a lesson. A lesson. Like I was the villain in a children's book. I said, so you're choosing her. My mother sighed like I was exhausting. We're not choosing. We're just trying to keep the family together. I almost choked. By defending her? Don't be so dramatic, she snapped. You always turn everything into a crisis. I hung up on her. I sat on my couch staring at the wall, shaking with rage. A few days later, my sister messaged me. Not with accountability. With audacity. Can I date him officially? She asked. I don't want it to be weird. She wouldn't have asked that unless she knew my mother had her back. I stared at that message until my eyes watered. I typed back something I'm not proud of. Something sharp. Something ugly. But honestly, she deserved it. Then, 2 weeks later, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. My mother pushed past me like she owned my doorway. My father stood behind her looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. We wanted to tell you in person, my mother said. My stomach dropped. Tell me what? My mother smiled like she was delivering news about a baby shower. They moved in together. It's serious. My vision went white for a second. They moved in together. Where? My mother waved her hand toward the air like it was obvious. At the house. I felt something inside me go still. Not numb this time. Still. Like a door closing. The house with my name on the deed, I said slowly. My father cleared his throat. It's temporary, until they save up. Save up. Sure. My mother tilted her head. And it's better for your sister than living with strangers? She's family. A dead little sound slipped out of me. So I'm not family. My mother's eyes hardened. Don't do that. I stared at them. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. That's when I finally said the thing I'd been avoiding because I knew it would blow everything up. Either she moves out, I said, or I stop supporting any of this. My mother's mouth fell open like I'd slapped her. Excuse me? I bought that house to keep you from being homeless, I said, voice shaking. Not to give my sister a romantic nest with the guy who cheated on me. My father finally spoke, voice low and pleading. Please don't do this. We can't afford rent anymore. I looked at him. My father, who had spent my whole life avoiding conflict, now begging me not to force him to face consequences. I felt pity and anger tangled together like barbed wire. My mother said, "You're punishing us because you're jealous." Jealous. That word hit me like a punch. I leaned against the wall because my legs felt weak. You think I'm jealous? My mother crossed her arms. You're always trying to control everyone. Maybe this is why men never stay. Stop, I said, loud. It surprised even me. Stop talking. My sister wasn't even there. She didn't need to be. My mother was doing her work for her. I repeated my ultimatum. My mother refused. My father stayed silent. And just like that, the choice was made for me. That night, I went home and sat in the dark with my phone in my hand, staring at the screen like it could tell me what to do. I listened to voice messages pile up without opening them. My mother sobbing, my father begging, my sister sending, "I love you" like that fixed anything. I didn't sleep. I kept seeing that bedroom, that blanket. My mother's face softening toward my sister. Let her have one thing. At some point, maybe around dawn, I realized I had been waiting my whole life for them to finally choose me, and I was done. The next day, I tried to work like nothing had happened, which was a joke. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and every time my phone buzzed, I felt my stomach drop. Right before lunch, my mother posted a smiling kitchen photo with a caption about fresh starts. That's when I realized she wasn't just defending my sister, she was erasing me. So that afternoon, I called a lawyer. Just a regular local lawyer who dealt with housing stuff. He walked me through the exact notice rules for our county because I refused to do anything sloppy that could blow back on me later. Since there was no formal lease, just a family arrangement, I could end it with proper written notice and a timeline to vacate. If they refused to leave, it could eventually turn into a formal process with the county, including removal. But he was clear. We do it clean, by the book. I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt sick with relief, like I'd been holding my breath for years and didn't realize it. He explained it in plain language. The house was in my name, there was no lease, and I could end the arrangement with written notice and a deadline, but only if I followed our local rules. If they refused, it could turn into a slow, expensive, humiliating process. So I did it the clean way, even when I wanted to scream. I nodded, swallowing hard, and said, "Okay." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at my own bills. My savings were already thin from buying the house. Every legal step was another fee. I was paying money to protect myself from the thing I'd bought to protect them. The irony almost made me choke. Over the next several weeks, my mother doubled down. She posted more house photos on a social media app, calling it our home and acting like she'd earned it. My sister filled the comments with hearts. My boyfriend, my ex, left a joke like he belonged. I sat there staring at the screen, and I swear I felt my blood pressure rise. I wanted to comment. Actually, I paid for it, but I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to go public. I was still hoping, in the most pathetic part of my brain, that they'd come to their senses privately. They didn't. My sister started getting mail delivered there with her name like she'd established residency. My mother started referring to the spare room as her room out loud, like she was claiming territory. My father kept texting me about the water bill and the yard needs care, like I was their property manager. Then my mother called me and asked for money to renovate the kitchen. "I found these cabinets online," she said, excited. "We could modernize everything." My throat tightened. "Are you serious?" She went quiet, offended. "Why are you being like this? It's our home too." "Our?" I repeated. "It's mine. My name is on the deed. I pay the mortgage." She snapped. "Don't throw that in my face. After everything we've done for you. Everything they'd done for me. Right. Like raising me to be their emergency contact was a gift." I said, "No, I'm not paying for upgrades." My mother's voice turned cold. "So you're going to punish us forever." I hung up. Again. A couple days later, I drove to the house to pick up that folder I'd left in a drawer months earlier. I knocked. My mother didn't answer right away. When she finally opened the door, she looked at me like I was an unwanted guest. My sister stood behind her in the hallway wearing one of my old sweatshirts. Because of course she was. My ex was in the living room, feet up, laughing at something on his phone like he belonged there. I felt my hands curl into fists. My mother said, "We weren't expecting you." I smiled, and it probably looked insane. "Yeah, funny how that works." I walked in anyway. My mother tried to block me. I stepped around her. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for my stuff, but I could feel my throat tightening with rage. My sister said, "Don't be weird." I turned and stared at her. "Don't be weird," I repeated. "That's what you're going with." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." I grabbed my folder from the drawer and left without another word because I knew if I stayed, I would say something I couldn't take back, and honestly, I wanted the moral high ground even though I hated that I cared. On my drive home, I screamed in my car. Just one long scream, throat burning, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. Then I cried. Then I made this ugly little sound at myself. Because who screams in their car at 31? People like me, apparently. Over the next few weeks, I had the formal notice drafted and sent. It gave them the required timeline to vacate based on our county's rules. Enough time to find somewhere else, but with a clear deadline. Once she realized I wasn't bluffing, my mother tried a different strategy. Sweetness. She'd text me little memories like, "Remember when you were little and you'd sit on my lap while I brushed your hair?" As if nostalgia could be used like a credit card. She'd send me photos of the house at sunset, like she was trying to make me feel guilty for taking away a home. She even sent me a voice message where she sounded so gentle I almost believed it. "I know you're hurting," she said softly, "but please don't destroy your father. He's so stressed." I listened to that message 3 times, and each time I got angrier, because it was still about him, still about keeping everyone else comfortable. Still not one sentence that sounded like, "I'm sorry I defended your sister." My sister, meanwhile, went full victim mode online. She posted selfies with puffy eyes and captions about finding strength. People commented hearts and told her she was brave. I wanted to scream. I didn't. I just stared at the screen like, are we living in the same universe? One afternoon, I got invited into a group chat with extended family. My mother had started it. She wrote, "We need to talk as a family because we're going through something painful." She didn't say Brielle is hurting. She said we. Then my aunt wrote, "What happened?" And my mother typed, "Brielle is trying to take our house away because she's upset about our relationship." I stared at my phone, jaw hanging open. That's how she summarized it. That was her official statement. Not my younger daughter slept with my older daughter's boyfriend. Not, we handled it terribly. Just, Brielle is upset, and now she's being cruel. Something in me snapped again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was clarity. I typed, "My sister slept with my boyfriend in the house I bought, and Mom told me to let her have one thing." The chat went silent for a full minute. Then my mother sent a message. "Don't air private family matters." One cousin wrote, "Wait, is that true?" My sister jumped in and wrote, "It was a mistake, and Brielle is being dramatic." I wrote, "You asked me for permission to date him. That's not a mistake. That's a strategy." My mother started sending angry messages, accusing me of humiliating them. My father sent a single message, please stop, always the same." I left the chat. After that, people got weird. A cousin stopped answering me, like silence was a moral stance. But later that night, my aunt texted me privately, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." It made me feel less crazy. And I finally understood something else. My mother didn't fear losing the house as much as she feared losing the image of being a good mother. That's why she protected my sister. That's why she attacked me. My sister was her reflection. I was her reminder that she'd failed. By the time the deadline was getting closer, I'd also started talking to a realtor. A normal local realtor who showed houses, who talked fast, who said things like, "This market is weird, but we can work with it." I didn't want to sell. Not because I loved the house, because selling felt like admitting I'd failed at saving my family. But I also knew keeping it would keep me tied to them forever. The realtor told me the house needed to be accessible and presentable for showings, and ultimately delivered empty at closing. She told me I'd have to give notice for visits. She told me people were messy. I swallowed a laugh. You have no idea. The showing started, scheduled with proper notice. My family acted like toddlers through everyone, forgetting appointments, leaving laundry out like the house was a protest. My mother texted that I was being abusive. My father kept begging, "Can we please keep the peace?" After several more weeks of back and forth, 3 offers came in. I chose the highest one because I needed the money back before my emergency jar became a joke. The offer required the house to be vacant at closing, and that part was non-negotiable. My lawyer was clear. I could sell with them still living there, but nobody would close unless the house was empty. We'd already followed the county timeline for notice. I offered them cash to help with moving costs if they left voluntarily. They refused. I told my lawyer. My lawyer said, "Okay, we stick to the timeline." I sent one more message to my parents. Not begging, just an offer. I told them I'd give them a small amount to help with moving costs if they left before the deadline. I didn't have to, but I knew how eviction records could mess up future housing, and I was trying to be a human being even while I was furious. My mother responded, "We don't want your dirty money." My sister responded with laughing emojis. I stared at my phone and felt something cold settle in my chest. Fine, no help. A week later, my mother showed up at my workplace. I was on my lunch break, eating a sad salad at my desk when a coworker popped her head in and said, "There's a woman out front asking for you." My stomach dropped. I already knew. I walked out into the lobby and there she was. My mother, eyes blazing, like she'd come to pick a fight. The front desk person looked trapped behind the counter, and a security guard drifted closer. My boss was walking by with a clipboard. Of course he was. My mother started yelling immediately. "People cheat. It happens. You're going to put us on the street over something normal." I lowered my voice. Because I didn't want a scene. That was my instinct. Manage. Contain. "Not here," I said through my teeth. One of my coworkers hovered behind me like she wanted to yank me back into the hallway, but she didn't know where to put her hands. She didn't care. You promised! You promised we'd never worry again. I could feel my face burning. My boss slowed down, pretending not to listen. Coworkers stared at their screens like they were suddenly fascinating. I said, "You're not getting kicked out because of nothing. You know why this is happening." My mother pointed at me like I was a criminal. "Because you're jealous. Because your sister found love and you can't handle it." I felt something snap. Not loud, just inside. I said, "Steady. If you keep screaming, I'm leaving. And you can scream at the wall." She kept screaming anyway. So I turned around and walked back into the office. My hands were shaking. My throat hurt. I shut my door and stared at the ceiling for a minute like I was trying not to cry. After she left, my boss knocked lightly and said, "Everything okay?" I wanted to laugh. "No," I said, "but I'll be fine." That night, I sat on my couch and felt like my whole body was one big bruise. I kept thinking about how my mother never once asked me if I was okay. Not after the betrayal. Not after the collapse. Not after the humiliation. Her only concern was losing the house. I realized I wasn't losing my family. I'd never really had what I thought I had. I was losing an illusion. As the final deadline approached, the realtor kept texting updates about the buyer's timeline, inspections, paperwork. My family kept obstructing. My lawyer warned me gently that if they refused to leave by the deadline, the next formal step could involve the county delivering official notices and eventually setting a removal date. It wasn't loud, but it was humiliating. It would be on record. It would be messy. I didn't want that. Not because they didn't deserve consequences, but because I didn't want to be tied to the mess any longer than necessary. So I sent one last message. "Leave by the deadline. Please don't make this worse." My father called me and cried. I'd never heard my father cry. It made my chest ache. "Please," he said. "Your mother won't bend. But please." I wanted to say, "Then you bend." I wanted to say, "Choose me for once." But I didn't. I just said, "I'm sorry," because I was still that 19-year-old paying the electric bill, feeling responsible for everyone's pain. The last day arrived, gray and cold. I drove to the house and sat in my car down the street for a minute because I didn't want to watch. I didn't want the image of them carrying boxes to become another thing I'd replay in my head at night. But I went anyway. I walked up the driveway. They were moving. Actually moving. When they realized the deadline was real and the sale was going through, they finally stopped posturing and started packing. My father was carrying a box with his shoulders hunched. My mother was slamming a drawer shut like she was trying to punish the furniture. My sister stood by the car, arms crossed, looking at me like I'd betrayed her. She took a step toward me. Then she stopped, like she was afraid I'd say something that would ruin her performance. My mother walked up close enough that I could smell her perfume. "I hope you're happy," she hissed. I looked at her and, for the first time, I didn't scramble for the right response. I didn't plead. I didn't explain. I just said, "I'm going to be." My mother's eyes went wide like she didn't recognize me. My father looked at me, and in his eyes I saw regret and fear and something like shame. He opened his mouth like he wanted to speak. He didn't. He loaded another box. My sister muttered, "You're sick." I almost laughed. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I'm finally done being your safety net." I left them there and drove away before I could crumble. A couple of days later, my father texted me once, just, "I hope you're okay." I stared at it for a long time. That little line hurt more than any screaming. It was the most courage he had. Then he went quiet again. When I got home, I cried. Not because I regretted it. Because it was over. Because it hurt. Because boundaries still feel like grief when you were trained to equate love with sacrifice. The sale went through a few weeks later. I signed papers, transferred keys, and watched that chapter of my life close. The money that came back didn't make me rich, but it stopped me from drowning. I rebuilt my emergency jar. I paid off some debt I'd accumulated from all the helping. I slept for the first time in months without waking up to phantom phone vibrations. Then the messages started coming from unknown numbers. "Your parents are staying with relatives. Your mom is so sad. How could you do that to them?" At first, I replied. I tried to explain. I tried to be fair. But I realized quickly that people didn't want the truth. They wanted the version that made them comfortable. The version where I was cold and my parents were saints and my sister was fragile. So I stopped replying. One cousin called and said, "I heard you kicked everyone out because you were mad about a guy." My jaw locked. "Yeah," I said. "That's the story they're telling." I told her what happened. Not in legal language, just facts, the betrayal, my mother's sentence, the moving them in, the entitlement, the way they treated my life like a buffet. There was a long silence. Then she said quietly, "Oh." A few days later, an aunt texted me privately and said she was sorry. Another relative never spoke to me again. Some people believe whatever story makes them feel less guilty for not helping. My parents ended up staying with a relative in another state. My father took odd jobs. My mother complained about starting over like it was a tragedy inflicted on her by fate, not by her choices. The relative refused to let my sister stay long because she was too much drama, which made me snort because, yes, welcome to the club. My sister and my ex tried to stay together, but surprise, love built on betrayal doesn't do great under pressure. They didn't have my money. They didn't have a house handed to them. They had bills. They had utility charges, grocery runs that turned into fights, and that ugly moment when you realize love doesn't pay late fees. I heard they started snapping at each other over rent, chores, and money, because when you build a relationship on stealing, you don't exactly trust each other with the receipts. A couple of months later, someone from the rec league sent me a message out of the blue. It was the kind of, "Hey, are you okay?" text you send when you've heard something messy. I stared at the screen for a beat before I opened it. She told me she'd been at a backyard get-together where my sister and my ex showed up together. She said he was leaning way too close to another woman near the cooler, smiling like he couldn't help himself. And my sister snapped. She grabbed his phone, he yanked it back, and they started yelling in front of everyone. Then, apparently, someone played a voice note he'd sent to another woman, and the whole yard went dead quiet. My sister ran to her car crying, and my ex just stood there looking annoyed, like consequences were an inconvenience. People watched. People judged. Someone pulled up messages on a phone showing that both of them had been talking to other people. It was messy and human, and exactly what happens when two attention-hungry people collide. My sister tried to call me after he left her. I didn't answer. My mother tried to call me after that too, like she expected me to swoop in and fix my sister's heartbreak. I didn't answer that either. I'm not going to pretend I became this perfect, healed person overnight. I didn't. Sometimes I still feel that old guilt trying to rise up in me, like a reflex. Sometimes I still get angry in the grocery store for no reason because my brain is replaying old conversations. Sometimes I still want to text my father and ask if he's okay because he's still my father and I'm still human, but I don't. Instead, I started doing small, boring things that used to feel impossible. I stopped sleeping with my phone in my hand. I cooked simple dinners and ate them at my own table. I let the silence be quiet instead of threatening. Months later, I went to a low-key New Year's get-together with friends and realized something embarrassing. I could laugh without scanning the room for the next crisis. One afternoon, my sister tried again. She sent a message from a new number like that would make me forget the last one. "Can we talk?" she wrote. "Mom's been crying. Dad's not sleeping. This has gone on long enough." There wasn't a single sentence that sounded like responsibility. So I typed back, "No." I didn't add an essay. I didn't defend myself. I hit block, set my phone on the counter, and went back to what I was doing. That night it rang 3 times anyway. I watched it light up while I rinsed a plate and decided it could ring forever. The next morning I walked to my mailbox and pulled out a small stack of envelopes. I opened them at my kitchen table, the same way people do when they aren't bracing for a final notice. Later, I paid my own electric bill online in under a minute and closed the tab. And one afternoon, I caught myself humming while I cleaned, because nobody in my home could call betrayal normal. They can keep their definition. It doesn't live here.